You think you are better than the other virgins in the land? That stupid virginity will die with you today.
Brother, please. I am your sister. Please, don't do this.
The night Kelechi pushed his own sister into the river, the moon was so bright that every movement in the water shone like silver. Anyone watching from the cliff would have thought they were seeing a simple splash. But Kelechi knew the truth. The river below was not just water. Something lived in it. Something ancient. Something hungry. And that night, he had brought it a sacrifice. But to understand how a man could throw his own virgin sister to a monster, you must go back to the beginning. Because monsters are not always born. Sometimes they are created by greed, fear, and bad choices. Before we begin, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Also, kindly let me know where you are watching from. It would be nice to know what part of the world my amazing viewers are from. And now, the story. In a quiet farming village surrounded by green hills and wide rivers, two children grew up together. Their names were Kelechi and Ifi. Kelechi was 8 years older than his sister. When their parents died suddenly from sickness, he became both brother and guardian. Ifi was only 10 at the time. She was a gentle girl, quiet and kind. Everyone in the village described her the same way. She has a soft heart. As she grew older, people also noticed something else. She was very beautiful. Her skin was light and smooth like fresh palm oil. Her eyes were bright blue, something rare in their region. Her smile could calm even the angriest person. But what people talked about most was something else. Ifi was known as a pure girl, a virgin. In that village, purity was considered very valuable, especially to older men looking for young wives. The elders often said, a girl who protects her purity protects her future. But Ifi never thought about such things. She simply lived her quiet life, helping on the farm and respecting her brother. For many years, Kelechi took care of her well. He farmed her land, he sold cassava and yams in the market, and although life was not rich, they always had enough to eat. But everything began to change the day Kelechi discovered gambling. It started as a simple evening activity. Some young men in the village gathered under a mango tree to play card games with small coins. Kelechi joined them one night, and that night he won. He returned home smiling and excited. Ifi, look what I won. He showed her a handful of coins. Ifi laughed happily. That means we can buy fish tomorrow. For a while, the gambling seemed harmless. Sometimes Kelechi won, sometimes he lost. But slowly, the games became more serious. The coins became larger amounts, and the small losses began to grow into dangerous debts. Before long, Kelechi was gambling almost every night. He farmed less, he slept less, and he lost far more money than he ever won. But by the time he realized the danger, it was already too late.
Now, every village has someone people fear. In this one, that man was Chief Oduma. Chief Oduma was a wealthy lender. If someone needed money, they went to him. But borrowing from him was like tying a rope around your own neck. His interest was cruel. If you failed to repay him, he would take everything you own: land, animals, homes, and sometimes something even worse. It was whispered that several young women in nearby villages had become his wives because their families could not repay their debts. One evening, after losing heavily at gambling, Kelechi finally did the thing many people feared. He went to borrow money from Chief Oduma. At first, it was a small loan, then another. Soon, the amount became enormous, and when the time came to repay the money, Kelechi had nothing left. Chief Oduma visited their home one hot afternoon. Ifi was sweeping the compound when she saw the old man walking through the gate. His eyes studied her slowly, the way a buyer studies an animal in the market. Ifi felt uncomfortable. Kelechi greeted the man nervously. "Welcome, Chief." Chief Oduma sat down and smiled. Then he pointed toward Ifi. So this is the sister? Kelechi forced a laugh. Yes. The old man nodded slowly. She is beautiful. Ife lowered her eyes politely. But then the man said something that made the air heavy. I hear she is also still a virgin. Kelechi swallowed. Everyone in the village knew it. Ife had protected her purity carefully. She was 17 and unmarried. That alone made her valuable in the eyes of many men. But for Chief Oduma, it made her something even more tempting. He leaned closer. I will forgive your debt, he said quietly. Kelechi's eyes widened. If, he pointed at Ife, she becomes my wife when she turns 18. The room fell silent. Kelechi should have refused immediately, but instead he hesitated. The debt was huge, too big for him to repay. The farm would never be enough, his house would be taken, his life destroyed. Chief Oduma noticed the fear in his eyes, and he smiled. Your sister's virginity is worth far more than the money you owe, he said calmly. Kelechi closed his eyes. Then he nodded. The deal was made, without Ife even knowing. When Ife later discovered the truth, she could not believe it. You promised me to him, she cried. You promised my life because of your gambling. He is old enough to be our father, and he is very cruel. Kelechi looked ashamed but stubborn. He slammed the table hard and said, I had no choice. He is rich and will forgive my debt. Can't you understand? You are still a virgin. Do you know how much that is worth to a man like him? Ife stared at him in disbelief. So that is what I am now. A payment? Kelechi said nothing. Ife shook her head. I will never marry him, she said, and walked out of the hut. As her 18th birthday approached, the wedding plans quietly began. Chief Oduma sent gifts, cloth, jewelry, expensive pomade. But Ife had already made her decision. On the night before the ceremony, she ran away. She ran through the farms, through the bushes, through the dark paths of the village. She would rather face the unknown world than become the wife of a cruel old man who valued her only for her virginity.
Chief Oduma was furious. The next day, his men destroyed Kelechi's farm. They burned his storage hut. They killed his animals. Then they delivered the message. If she does not return, you will suffer worse. Kelechi begged them, but they only laughed, and slowly his anger began to grow. Not toward the lender, but toward Ife. 2 days later, Kelechi found his sister hiding near the river cliffs. When she saw him, she felt relief, but his face was cold. You ruined everything, he said. Ife shook her head. I saved myself. You cost me everything. You are supposed to marry him. I am not property that you sell, Ife roared back. Kelechi's voice became dark. If you refuse to solve my problem, then you will become another solution. Ife stepped back slowly. What do you mean? Kelechi pointed to the river. You have heard the stories. The water monster, a spirit said to live beneath the cliffs, a creature that accepted sacrifices. Ife's heart began to race. In a trembling voice, she said, No, Kelechi, you wouldn't. But Kelechi had already made his decision. If you cannot pay my debt, he said quietly, then at least your death might bring me favor from the river. Then he pushed her. The river made a faint splash, and he smiled wickedly. Then walked back home, leaving his only sister for dead. Ife fell into the cold river. The current pulled her under. Then the water began to move. She couldn't fight the current. In fact, she had accepted death as her fate. Suddenly, a massive shape rose from the depths, a creature made of swirling water, the water monster. Its glowing eyes stared at the frightened girl. At that point, it seemed everywhere went still, because she was still battling the river, but the waves weren't so powerful anymore. She could be still and talk to the monster. But instead of attacking, it spoke. Why are you offered? Ife, shaking and terrified, told the truth about her brother, about his gambling, about the debt, about the forced marriage, about how her virginity had become the price men fought over. The monster listened quietly. Then it said something strange. "You are innocent." And instead of killing her, the river carried her far away and dropped her at the bank of the river in another faraway land. Years passed. Ify survived, grew, and thrived. She built a new life far from the village. One day, while purchasing items from the fish market, she heard news about her brother. Chief Oduma's men had beaten him badly. They broke both his legs. Now he lived alone and helpless. When she went home, she had an inner struggle on if to go to his rescue or leave him to die the same way he did to her. But she had a good heart. She decided to forgive her brother. After all, she missed him a lot. When Ify returned to the village, she found her brother lying on a weak bed in their ruined home. He looked older, tired, wounded, broken, ashamed. When he saw her, tears filled his eyes. "I thought you were dead." Ify stood quietly. He began crying. "I was greedy. I was angry. I treated my own sister like a commodity. Please have mercy on me, Ify. I am sorry for everything." Ify looked at him for a long time. Then she said softly, "I forgive you." She packed up a few of his belongings and took her crippled brother away from the village. She cared for him, fed him, protected him, because even after everything, he was still family, and Kelechi for sure learnt his lesson the hard way. So what do we learn from this tale? Greed destroys families. Gambling leads people to terrible decisions. A person's purity or body should never become a price for debt. Forgiveness can heal even the deepest betrayal. Because in the end, the true monster was never the one in the river. It was the greed inside a human heart. Let's talk in the comments. What other lessons did you learn from this story? If you were Ify, would you go back for your brother? Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like and share. Until the next story, be content and kind.